Tee Higgins, Tetairoa McMillan, and Jameson Williams are all top 12 wide receiver fantasy plays this weekend in juicy matchups. We dig into our full wide receiver fantasy ranks for week 12 on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Fantasy Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today is Crossover Thursday on the Locked On Network, and Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Today, we're finishing up our positional rankings for Week 12 with the wide receiver position. We already went through quarterbacks and tight ends on Tuesday, running backs on Wednesday. So if you missed those, go listen to those episodes. We have 4 teams on buys. So if you've been relying on Jalen Waddle or any of the Chargers wide receivers, Deebo Samuel or Cortland Sutton, Troy Franklin, all of those guys are on bye this week. To jump to the top of our wide receiver rankings, we have the same exact 4 at the top in the same order. So number 1, Jackson Smith-Njigba, 2, Puka Nacua, 3, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and then 4, CeeDee Lamb. But then our rankings take a turn. Like, they're pretty different with some of these players this week. So at number 5, you have Davonte Adams against the Buccaneers after having just 1 reception last week. He did have 8 targets, though, still. I'm not too far behind you. I have him at number 10, but let me tell everyone why you love him so much this week to have him at 5.
Yeah, he's a guy that you can count on for now the 6 points. It seems like every week. It's 10 touchdowns now to lead the NFL. So it's yet another double-digit scoring season for Davonte Adams. So you can bail you out even with a score in a game like that from last week. So I look at this matchup. The Buccaneers secondary is not too scary. We saw some big plays happen last week for the Bills when Josh Allen was putting things up there. So it's a pretty good matchup at home. It's definitely a better one than they faced last week. The Seahawks are tough on wide receivers, or tougher. They're weaker in coverage against backs and tight ends, and that's what we actually saw develop in that game for Matthew Stafford. So overall, I think this is a good spot. I think the Bucs should be a little bit more competitive, I think, than the Seahawks were. I mean, the Seahawks were kicking field goals. That was a problem last week. The Bucs can also get in that mode with the red zone issues, but I'm hoping they're a little bit competitive. If not, I think the Rams might have a little bit trouble running the ball inside power running, so that would prompt Matthew Stafford to throw the ball more on the outside. Puka Nacua and Adams have good matchups in this one on the outside. So I really like the rebound here for Adams. There's a very good chance, however, he will score again. It's just a matter of how many catches he gets. But really, when they get to the red zone, it's 3 plays. Kyren Williams handoff or throw at this point, Adams, or pick a tight end, any tight end. That's usually their 3 plays inside the red zone. Puka Nacua is probably a close 4th, but that's how you would look at it for this Rams offense. I mean, Adams basically is a red zone machine, and why wouldn't you be if you're going to put a lot of attention on Puka Nacua down in scoring position?
Yeah, and Jamel Dean could be out for the Buccaneers. He's been one of the best coverage corners in the league this year, so that would be huge. Now, my wide receiver 5 is Rashee Rice against the Colts. You have him all the way down at 16 this week. It was a bad week for him in week 11, but it was in Denver. It was against the Broncos secondary, and even without Pat Surtain, they have still been a very, very good defense. And Rashee Rice, the first 3 weeks he played this season, fantastic, amazing. Scored a touchdown, at least 1 touchdown in all those games, scored at least 17 fantasy points and half PPR in all 3 of those games. Last week, he still got 9 targets. It just only turned into 6 receptions, 38 yards, no touchdowns. Because of the hard matchup, the Colts, on the other hand, have allowed the 10th most points per game to wide receivers this year, unlike the Broncos, who have allowed the fewest. So I'm back on with Rashee Rice, and I expect him to have a big game.
Yeah, I'm just looking at Sauce Gardner in this game, potentially being on Rashee Rice and following him a little bit. I don't know, he could be on Xavier Worthy at some point as well, but I think the way that Rice is playing and his importance more to Patrick Mahomes all over the field, I could see that's where we want to go more of this matchup. And look, Kenny Moore sometimes would get him in the slot. So that's a key, is getting him away from Gardner at times, but Gardner can also move around if you want him to do that. So again, I'm just tempering my expectations overall for the Chiefs. I think they're going to have to use a lot of their tight end, Kelsey, and throw to the middle of the field. So that could help Rice in this game. But Gardner's going to probably be looming there a little bit. Again, they started out so hot. Rice is still pretty good, but I think he actually might be more touchdown dependent overall than Adams in some cases, because his output is so low sometimes with the yardage that comes with the catches. So again, he'll be fine. I just don't love it. As I'm not going to put him that high into the top 10, but top 20, yeah, for sure. I feel good about Rice producing right there.
Now, right after him, I have Nico Collins, who plays on Thursday night. You have him at number 9, so we both like him tonight against the Bills. Emeka Egbuka, I have at 7. You have him at 13. But then it gets interesting because guys like Tetairoa McMillan and Tee Higgins and Jameson Williams all come into play. You actually have Tee Higgins as your wide receiver 6 this week, Tetairoa McMillan at 8, and Jameson Williams at 10. I have McMillan at 8, Higgins at 9, and Jameson Williams at 11. With McMillan and Williams, Jameson Williams, they just have amazing matchups against the 49ers and Giants, who are giving up so many points to wide receivers. And then with Tee Higgins, it's like the Patriots aren't the easiest matchup for wide receivers. They're more middle of the pack. But without Jamar Chase there, possibly with Joe Burrow back, I don't think that really matters all too much, though, because Joe Flacco has been doing good things with Higgins. He's going to get a lot of targets, and he's been a scoring machine, scoring 5 receiving touchdowns over the last 4 games. So really love all 3 of those guys.
Yeah, Higgins, the funny thing is he's been stretching the field more, making some bigger plays downfield, which he's capable of doing, but that's not always his role. And we'll see if Burrow can return. He is practicing in full. They haven't been committing yet to him playing. That means he'll definitely probably play in week 13 on Thursday night, or when they play Thanksgiving against the Ravens, which is not the worst matchup in the world, right? They might have to put the ball up in a lot in that game. Yeah, the Patriots are tricky, right? But they're not unbeatable, right? We've seen Drake London put up a big game against them, and Higgins is kind of built like Drake London. He's a bigger dude with a body that can position well in the red zone, and it also can get a little bit downfield. So this is a really great opportunity. This could be like the perfect storm for Higgins. Without Chase and if Joe Burrow returns, I mean, it doesn't get much better than that in a 1-2 punch here to boost someone's fantasy value. So really excited about Tee Higgins overall. And these matchups for these other guys are just off the charts really good this week when I look at it. I mean, I look at Tetairoa McMillan. I mean, the 49ers, you know what happened. They gave up 185 receiving yards to Michael Wilson last week. So their secondary is in shambles right now, and it times well because McMillan by far had his best game as a rookie with 2 touchdowns against the Falcons. So that all lines up here. I think I might bump Rice a little bit up, but I'm just a little bit more excited about these guys. And then Jameson Williams, man, the Giants, they give up big, long touchdowns in every game. It cost them last week. Christian Watson changed the game there for the Packers. So it's inevitable. I think it's a terrible matchup for the Giants defense. Lions could put up 50 in that game, so I want to get all my Lions in there.
Yep, I am with you for sure. I love Jameson Williams this week. Now, one guy you're sticking high on that has not been performing is Justin Jefferson. You're still sticking with him at wide receiver 7. I finally moved him down. He's down at wide receiver 17. I'm not telling anyone to sit him. He's still Justin Jefferson. He still can have a big game, and he's still getting a ton of targets. He has not had fewer than 9 targets in any game since week 4. But it's a tough matchup against the Packers, allowing the 10th fewest points per game to wide receivers. And he has not, I mean, in 4 of the last 5 games, he scored 10 points or fewer. Last 2 weeks, 5.7 points and 8.6 points. And that Bears matchup at home was not a hard one. So it's very confusing. This one's on the road. I just, JJ McCarthy and him cannot connect.
Yeah, it's disappointing because we've seen it work with basically every other quarterback. Backups they put in, everybody else for the most part. And again, JJ McCarthy is struggling. This is a little bit of the coaching staff to get him on the right page here with Jefferson and really all the receivers, Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson. So, look, it's hard. McCarthy missed a good chunk there of what he could have been learning as a rookie because he got hurt. And he's been thrown into the fire without a net here. So I don't know what you're looking at exactly for next year with McCarthy or the Vikings quarterback situation, but they got to fix that, right? You're paying a ton of money to Justin Jefferson. You got to get your young quarterback who's on his rookie deal to throw and be effective with Jefferson, or it's a waste of money and a waste of really your offense. So we have to see it going down the stretch. They don't have a chance to make the playoffs, let's be honest here. They're buried in a very tough division. So it's all about getting Jefferson and McCarthy on the same page the rest of the way.
Let's take a quick break, then we'll get to the rest of our wide receiver rankings, including all of these wide receivers playing in this Eagles-Cowboys game, which you and I differ on, and which guys we like and don't like in this game. We'll get to that right after we hear from one of our sponsors.
All right, as Michelle told you to the top, this is Crossover Thursday on the network, and that's brought to you by Prize Picks. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement of the sports season, whether you're following the NFL and NBA or both at this time of year. There's no better time to jump in on the action. If you haven't had it to try yet, Prize Picks is the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats, and if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere Prize Picks operates. That includes California, Texas, and Georgia. Really, it's a lot of fun to play. They also have a new stacks feature. It's a game changer. You can now pick more on an individual player's stat line there. That's great. So you can parlay that there. If you like a player just to go off and dominate, you can do that. Plus, if your player leaves early with an injury, the injury reboot will save your lineup from a loss. So that's all good. Michelle and I will reveal our Prize Picks of the week, 3 each there for the NFL in week 12 on Friday's show. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. All right, Michelle, time to dive a little bit deeper into our wide receiver rankings here for week 12 in fantasy football. All right, let's start and continue here with the Cowboys-Eagles matchup. So on a heater, Dak Prescott. He just totally lit up the Raiders. But we saw what the Eagles did to the Lions with their pass rush and really suffocated Jared Goff. But the good thing for Dak is this game is at home in Dallas, where the Cowboys offense operates better. And Pickens was fantastic last week. So look, CeeDee Lamb, we both are always high on, right? He's a shoe-in to make a big plays every week. We actually both have him at number 4 this week. Now, George Pickens, I have him all the way up here at wide receiver 11. Michelle's a wide receiver 19. So, Michelle, why are you a little lower than I am? I just think Pickens is just now involved and is going to keep doing damage here with CeeDee Lamb the rest of the way.
Yeah, I think he'll be fine. Like the 3 games prior to week 11, huge game against the Raiders, 10 points, 11 points, 11 points. Like he was putting up anywhere between 78 and 82 yards in those games, but no touchdowns. Last week was massive for him against the Raiders, but the Eagles defense has been just really good as of late. I do expect the Cowboys to put up points and win this game, but it might be a little bit tougher for a guy like George Pickens to get open deep. Over the last 4 weeks, the Eagles have allowed the fewest points per game to wide receivers. So it's just hard to predict that both Lamb and Pickens will have monster games. On the other hand, though, I really like DeVonta Smith for the Eagles in that game against the Cowboys. I have him at wide receiver 12. You're a little bit lower at wide receiver 20. I'm also a little bit higher on A.J. Brown than you at 15. You have him at 21. I get the concerns. I mean, DeVonta Smith last week, only 1 reception, 8 yards on 5 targets. And then for A.J. Brown, 11 targets. I mean, that's what you want to see, right? But then 7 receptions, 49 yards. So it's a very weird offense for the Eagles. But the Cowboys, they played better on defense this week coming out of the bye. They're emotional. They played a really bad offense in the Raiders. I just don't expect that defense to continue thriving. They just don't have the pieces on, at least in the secondary. So I do expect DeVonta Smith, it feels safer to me, but AJ Brown should be able to put together a nice game as well.
Yeah, that's if Jalen Hurts just forgets what they all said about him this week. I mean, Jalen Hurts might have something to prove here a little bit, and I don't know if that means he's going to involve A.J. Brown a lot or a little, and then spite him and go to a lot of DeVonta Smith this week. So that could definitely happen. as this drama goes from on the field, off the field, back on the field. So I don't know what you're going to get, but I think Jalen Hurts will go back to compiling. Look, it was rough for him. If you look at the numbers against the Lions, they were not good overall and was not a very good fantasy start. But I think he'll make up for it here. The Cowboys, you're right. They're still weak on the back end. They got a break by facing the Raiders last week. So don't read too much into that, right? Quinnen Williams, also first game in there, is jacked up. Had a very bad Raiders offensive line. Now, one thing you do need to concern yourself a little bit with, in the weeds a little bit, but important, is Lane Johnson and Cam Jurgens are hurt again. So this is not great, right? If when Lane Johnson's out, it's not as easy for the Eagles to either run the ball or pass protect Hurts. So let's watch that a little bit. It's good that Lane Johnson wouldn't be the guy on Quinnen Williams anyway, because it's inside and outside. But let's just watch this. I'm just a little wary that this game is going to be lower scoring than we would like. And just keep that in mind a little bit with this one. But that also could be where a couple big plays by these receivers make a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one guy I also like more than you is Chris Olave against the Falcons. I have him at wide receiver 13 this week. You have him at 22. I mean, with Tyler Shook, their last game in week 10 before their bye, big game, 5 receptions, 104 yards and a touchdown and 8 targets for 19 fantasy points and half PPR. He has had at least 98 receiving yards in 3 of the last 5 games. And I mean, the Falcons have allowed the 7th most points per game to wide receivers this year. And that we just saw Tetairoa McMillan go off on the Falcons last week. So I like Chris Olave this week. It's not like he has an insanely high ceiling, but I do think 15 points is very reasonable to get from Olave, somewhere around there, 15 to 18. So that's why I have him up in the teens for me this week.
Yeah, I'd want to be optimistic about Chris Olave for sure in this matchup. I am at 22, so I'm not too far. I'm a little bit down just because it's the Saints and it's Tyler Shough, and he could be a little bit of a wild card. The Falcons are a wild card as well, right? What kind of defense is going to show up? Are they going to stop the run? Are they going to stop the pass? Are they going to stop neither? What am I going to get in New Orleans? I have no idea what you're going to get. But I do want to know one thing. Chris Olave, he was dominating targets early in the season. Rashid Shaheed is gone. Brandon Cooks just got released. Who's left on this team except for him and Juwan Johnson? They have to catch passes a lot here from Shough. They want to throw the ball downfield. I said that could maybe help this offense, and it did a little bit where they opened it up with Shough because he has a bigger arm there than Spencer Rattler. And you got to credit Kellen Moore. I think he's extracted a lot more than we expected from these two quarterbacks than anyone could have really expected here. So Olave is the go-to guy. He's going to get pepper with targets. Pretty good initial chemistry between Olave, Johnson, and Shough in that first game, which was a win over the Panthers. So I think Saints at home, yeah, you like Olave a lot better in that particular matchup. And again, the Falcons, nothing scary as a consistent defense, but far from that this year.
And then 2 guys we are aligned on, Rome Odunze and DK Metcalf, playing in the same game. We have Odunze against the Steelers. I have him at wide receiver 14. You have him at 12. And then Metcalf, we both have him at wide receiver 18 against that Bears defense. Both are inconsistent, right? And it's been a while now since DK Metcalf has done anything. 3 straight really bad weeks. But the Bears are really bad in the secondary, have allowed the 5th most points per game to wide receivers, tied for the 2nd most receiving touchdowns to the position this season, behind only the Cowboys. And then with Odunze, like, he either has big games or does nothing. In 4 out of the last 6 weeks, it's been 4 points, 4 points, 0 points, 5 points, and then 2 big games in between there. So he could also give you nothing, but Steelers can be beat in the secondary, 3rd most points per game allowed to wide receivers, most receiving yards per game to wide receivers this season. So really both of these guys should be able to put up big performances in these matchups.
Yeah, I mean, what I would describe the Bears offense as, despite the winning of this team and being in first place, it's choppy, right? You don't know exactly what you're going to get. You don't know how the backfield touches are going to be split. You don't know how the targets are going to go around. You have DJ Moore basically disappearing from this offense, but you would think that would help Rome Odunze every week. It doesn't necessarily do that. And then figuring out the tight ends and how they use the back. So I think Ben Johnson is just a little fickle with the way he uses his playmakers, and that's something we're just going to have to get used to a little bit until they kind of find their guys, much like Detroit did with Ben Johnson. So I think, again, Odunze is the best target by far. I mean, he's the guy with the best chemistry with Caleb Williams by far as well. So I think he'll get it done. Like DK Metcalf, look, the double teams have been brutal. We'll see if Mason Rudolph playing or Aaron Rodgers playing, see if that makes a difference either way. But I think you stick with him. I just think you have to kind of reduce the expectations and hope for him more as a borderline wide receiver 2 or 3 versus a guy that is more like 2 that can finish in the top 12.
You just need him to start scoring touchdowns again is what we need. And this is a good matchup for that. So hopefully it gets done. Now, Michael Wilson had a monster game last week against the 49ers. We will let you know if you can trust him again in week 12, right after we take a quick break. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's finish up these wide receiver rankings for week 12. And we got to discuss Michael Wilson, who just had a monster day last week. 18 targets, 15 receptions, 185 yards against the 49ers, who have, they've been just bleeding fantasy points to wide receivers. That's why we love Tetairoa McMillan this week. But Marvin Harrison Jr. is out again officially for week 12. So Michael Wilson should be the top wide receiver target again for Jacoby Brissett. The Jaguars matchup is not as easy as the 49ers, but they have allowed the 13th most points per game to wide receivers this year. So how are you feeling about Michael Wilson this week, Vinny?
Yeah, just plug and play it. I mean, the matchup is good. I mean, the Jaguars corners have been in transition. They had a trade in the middle of the year and just not been a solid unit at all. So you look at the Jaguars, they're pretty good against the run. They can force some turnovers, but they're vulnerable to wide receivers in the passing game. So look, the hot hand is Jacoby Brissett. He's at home, which also helps in this matchup. The Jaguars are a better overall team and defense, as we saw last week as they destroyed the Chargers in Jacksonville. But the desert is weird. And you look at Brissett, I mean, who else is he going to throw to? Are they going to run the ball all that well in this game? Probably not. So what are they going to do? They're going to throw to Trey McBride and throw a lot to Michael Wilson. There's nobody else. I mean, I don't want to see Greg Dortch do a lot of things on this game. Like, that's right. It's pretty dwindling here. And he made it work. When you have 47 completions and you basically have 2 receivers, those guys are going to get a lot of fun here in the scoring aspect. So I do think, you keep playing Michael Wilson. I think it's actually better that Harrison is not playing. I mean, we saw it last week. That might be obvious, but I thought, okay, Michael Wilson could get a little bit more attention this week, right? I don't think he's that type of receiver, right? I think Harrison is a little intimidating in terms of the size and the way you cover him. So I think you look at that, but it's the Jaguars. The matchup is very beatable this week. So stick with Michael Wilson. If you're chasing last week's box score, it's not going to quite be there, but you'll take half of what he did. You'll be very happy with him as a wide receiver 3 this week.
Yeah, I have him at wide receiver 21, just behind DK Metcalf at 18, Pickens at 19, Zay Flowers at 20. So I have him right there at 21, and you're not far behind. You have Michael Wilson at 26 this week. Now, right behind Michael Wilson, I actually have Alec Pierce at number 22 against the Chiefs. I have him ranked ahead of Michael Pittman this week. You have Michael Pittman still ranked ahead of Alec Pierce, but my thing with this is Alec Pierce has at least been consistent. 3 out of the last 4 weeks, he's had at least 84 receiving yards. 3 out of the last 4 games, I should say. They had a bye. The Colts did last week. 12.3 points, 14.5, 16.4 in half PPR. He got that first touchdown. And the Chiefs are a tough defense against wide receivers. Allowed the second fewest points per game to wide receivers since week 3. And really the guys who have succeeded are the guys who are fast. It's been the Quentin Johnsons, the Jameson Williams, the Zay Flowers, the Troy Franklins. Like, those are the guys that have had success in fantasy against the Chiefs. It's not the slower, guys that are contested catch players like Michael Pittman Jr.
Yeah, when you look at that, I just think, are they going to put Trent McDuffie at all on Pierce and to keep the big play from happening, knowing that's a big element of the Colts offense, right? That's my only concern in this one. And then you have Tyler Warren back now that will be a factor, right? The Chiefs are going to have to account for him, so that helps, right, with Alec Pierce and getting him downfield. And really, that's a lot of how things are generated. They're natural through Jonathan Taylor running, and then he set up the play action, and then Warren drawing coverage attention, and then boom, you can fire up the deep shots to Alec Pierce. So I think he's playable this week. Do I love the matchup against the Chiefs? No. I mean, we saw Cortland Sutton was contained, but you're right. It was a Troy Franklin game more so than Sutton last week. It wasn't spectacular for Franklin, but if you're trying to extract points, I wouldn't be surprised if Pierce scores more than Pittman this week.
Yeah, and you seem to like Pittman a bit. You have him at 17, much higher than Pierce. But I mean, either of these guys could come down with it. Pittman has had plenty of good games off the back of a lot of touchdowns this year. I just don't really expect him to have a good game against the Chiefs. And Alec Pierce has been much more utilized in this offense, and it just needs a couple big plays, unlike Pittman, who needs a lot of targets to be successful. Now, we have a couple guys that are stepping into new roles. We got Andre Yoshavash against the Patriots, who should be stepping into more targets with Jamar Chase out. And then Darnell Mooney against the Saints with Drake London out. Both defenses are middle of the pack against fantasy wide receivers. Who would you trust more? Is it Yoshavash or Mooney?
I don't think I'm going to go near Andre Yoshavash this week. Also because I don't have to keep saying his name in my lineup this week.
Yeah.
I need more points from you this week. I love Darnell Mooney if he got the opportunity. And the best thing about this, it's not just that Drake London's out, it's that Kirk Cousins is the quarterback. So now you have a guy and a connection that was getting it done for a lot of last season. Keep that in mind. Darnell Mooney finished as a wide receiver 3 on average last year with Kirk Cousins starting most of the games until the final few weeks of the season. So I think that's great. I mean, it's a good timing. It's kind of like a Tetairoa McMillan going off before having another good matchup, right? Sometimes things align very well, or Tee Higgins playing here without Chase with potentially Burrow. So this is one of those things that work out well in Mooney's favor in this particular matchup. The Saints have been up and down a little bit in their secondary. We saw some clunker games by quarterbacks, some above average games, right, as well against the Saints. So I don't know what you're going to get from Kirk Cousins, quite frankly. He looked a little bit washed last time. I think they're probably going to be run heavy with Bijan Robinson this week. But I'll just say this. If anyone's going to get it done this week, I think I trust Darnell Mooney a little bit more than Kyle Pitts.
I think that's fair. And with Yoshavash, it really could be a Noah Fant game that steps up. Last year, whenever they were missing Tee Higgins, it was Gesicki at the time last year that was stepping up for them in that situation. And the Patriots have allowed quite a bit of fantasy points to tight ends this year. That's an area that you could beat them. So I do think this could be more of a Noah Fant game with Tee Higgins than a Yoshavash game. I have Yoshavash ranked way too high right now at 25. He's going to end up moving down. I'll move up Darnell Mooney because I think you made some good points there with Kirk Cousins. But what about Kayshon Boutte against the Bengals? He's back at practicing fully, does not have any injury designation right now. Would you rather go with Boutte or Mooney or a guy like Christian Watson, who had a big game last week, but really it was just a big game with touchdowns. So the receiving yards have not been there. The targets really haven't been there. And this Vikings matchup is not nearly as good as the Giants matchup that he got last week. So rank those guys, Boutte, Watson, and Mooney.
Yeah, I think I would definitely go with Mooney first. I mean, everything's lining up for him pretty well in this game to be the top target at that. I mean, we know, look, Christian Watson, I don't love the matchup, but I think he's playable because of his size and ability to make big plays, and he only needs like 1 or 2 plays to really make it happen. And really, there's not a lot of reliable stuff going on in the Packers offense passing game in general, right? I mean, he's the one guy that's healthy and out there with Tucker Kraft out, and his body can maybe make up for Kraft not being there all the way through the red zone. So I'd say that's the 2 guys that would play here. Kayshon Boutte is a little bit of a dart throw. The matchup is good enough if you need him, but we know this is a committee approach when it comes to the big plays for Drake May when he's not peppering Stephon Diggs, and we know this is a great matchup for the tight end as well. So I do like the matchup a lot for Boutte, but it's a little bit hit or miss. You're going to need the big play to really pay off, where I think you might get a little bit more consistent, I'm not going to say nuts volume, but 5 to 6 targets might be in store for Watson and maybe like 8 to 10 for Mooney this week.
I would rather go with Boutte. Boutte. Yeah, Boutte. I don't know why I said it wrong. I'd rather go with Boutte than Watson, for sure. Because like I said, the yards are not there for Watson. He just had an amazing matchup. With Boutte, I mean, he got hurt in week 9 really early in the game, so didn't do anything. But 3 weeks prior to getting hurt, 23.8, 12.5, 15 points and half PPR. He's getting it done. You're right. It's very big play dependent. He did not have more than 5 targets in any of those games. But I mean, Watson hasn't had more than 5 targets in any game this year yet either. And the yards are not there. So he's completely touchdown dependent. Watson is, and I don't like the matchup against the Vikings. So I'm with you. I'd go Mooney, then Boutte, then Watson. That will be it for today's episode. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen of the day. For your second listen, get a double dose of the Locked On NFL podcast. Tyler the Madman Rowland gives you a shot of espresso to start your football day, while Tony Wiggins takes you into the barbershop for the smoothest breakdowns to end the day. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We will be back tomorrow to hit on our favorite sleepers of the week and then get into our DFS favorite plays of the week as well. Don't miss it. Enjoy Thursday Night Football. Bye, y'all.